Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 4th day of October 2021. It is the very first Monday of the month and the very first month of the final quarter of 2021. And it's also the first day that IEBC will be beginning the vote listing in different parts of the country. They are targeting about 7.2 million new voters, but for this exercise that begins today, they are saying that the numbers are at a target of 4.5 million. We'll be getting to that shortly, but first let's take a look at the main stories of the two dailies. I want to begin with the Daily Nation. Ruto pours out heart to church on Uhuru fallout. DP lists issues he wishes to discuss with President Kenyatta during the proposed reconciliation meeting, even as State House declines to comment on the offer by Catholic bishops to lead peace talks between the two leaders. It's also a similar story on the front page of the Standard. 5 questions on Uhuru Ruto delayed talks. DP releases letter to deny claims by clerics that he has not responded to the invitation for dialogue with his boss. He instead accuses the clerics of dishonesty in all this. Where does the truth lie? So it's very interesting that you look at what appears to be sourced from the same letter, but the interpretation is obviously different on the front page of the Standard and on the front page of the Daily Nation. Let me just begin with you, Honorable Mbui. Do you think there's any possibility of reconciling the president and his deputy with just over 10 months to the general election? Is it even necessary?
Those are two questions. The one of whether it's necessary, I think, is the one I'll start with. I don't think so. Because these two gentlemen have had a very serious positive relationship from 2013, and they work together very closely. Now, we are not all aware of the reasons why they fell apart, but whatever it is, I think it's something great enough for them to accept to work separately, because as it is right now, the deputy president has already formed another party. He's no longer supporting his party leader on matters of development of the nation. He's breaching all rules and regulations set by the government, including even those COVID regulations that have come up to safeguard the livelihood of our people. So I think as it is right now, I would not encourage the president to bother reaching out. Again, remember that the few attempts that have been made, many times you notice that the deputy president will try to talk to the president through the media. Even in this particular case of the reconciliation that the Catholic bishops want to front, it's unfortunate that he's releasing a letter that to the media that should have been given to the president, and that is what they constantly do. He wants to talk to the president. I'm sure there are channels within which the deputy president and his boss can communicate, but he prefers to go to social media every time to communicate something. I don't think it is necessary. And then look at what is the content of his reconciliation. He wants to negotiate and discuss 2022, and that is actually, I believe, part of the reason why they fell out in the first place. Because when the president is busy figuring out how to improve the livelihood of Kenyans, the DP is looking at how to be president in 2022. So I think, because part of the things he said is, oh, I want to make sure the CEO of IEBC is in place. I don't know, make sure that there are certain laws that you need to push through Parliament in preparation for 2022. So for me, I think he's too focused and fixated on 2022 that they cannot even work together anymore.
And Commissioner Letangule, of course, I don't know you officially as a politician, but at least you're able to observe what's going on. In any case, in 2013, you were part of the team that oversaw the elections, and you handed the two gentlemen the winning certificate. Yeah. So looking back, what are your reflections, and is there any possibility of making up for the two leaders now?
The thing, Sam, is any chance to reconcile politicians is a good chance for the country. It's a healing moment. We are talking about conducting peaceful elections. We are talking about running the country smoothly. We are talking about ensuring that there are no friction, especially as we head into this 2022 election, which election proves to be very divisive in nature because the stakes are high. So to me, these two leaders came together in 2013. They conducted the elections. They came together on one ticket. 2017, 2 times they did the same. Now, I don't think that these differences should be should really escalate so much, because the more these differences are there, I'm looking at it from the perspective of an election manager, it's not good for the country. So I think I would encourage that kind of coming together. I would encourage the team, the work of the church, to bring leaders together, not just the deputy president and the president, but the rest of the leaders. Because at the end of the day, we must safeguard this country. We must make sure there is peace in this country for development, for investors, for tourists who come here, and even for our own children in future.
Okay, and I'm looking at a quote here on the Standard talking about, I want to give you my assurance that I hold nothing against the president. I supported him unconditionally and respect his mandate as head of state and government. I've also respected the president's decision to configure his administration as he considers most suited for the best expression of his vision and delivery of government agenda. That's according to the deputy president. And do you believe in those words? He's talking about respecting the president, supported him unconditionally, and he respects his decision to even reconfigure the administration as he so wishes. Do you respect, do you, not respect, do you believe that at a time that we've seen, we've been treated to all the exchanges between the two leaders, speaking to the media at different times?
Well, Sam, I don't think I need to believe it. We say that no one knows the mind of man except the Lord himself. So if DP says that that is his statement, then it's fine. I think the more pressing problem of constitutional significance is that the deterioration of the relationship between the president and the deputy president should not affect the flow of services or service delivery. So far, I don't think that has happened. The president is continuing, he has reorganized differently and is continuing to deliver on his mandate the best way he knows, because at the end of the day, the person with the political accountability is the president for this term. But in terms of politics, I think there's a genuine concern there when the president and the deputy president campaigned on the same platform. And then towards the end of his term, he abandons the deputy president and then reorganizes another formation that excludes. So his deputy president is right to fight back because he's organizing for power. And when you learn that politics is about interest formation and interest has been formed as to exclude you, I think he's at liberty to do what he can do to revive his political fortunes. So the fallout, what we see as fallout is a realization by the deputy president that the path the president has taken is decidedly different from the path he's taking as the deputy president, because it appears the president has made up his mind that he's going to support the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and it's fine. You know, he's constitutionally entitled to that opinion. In terms of the functional independence of that office of the deputy president, I mean, thankfully, the Constitution did not reserve serious functions for the office, except those that may have been assigned to the deputy by the president. So I think the executive is running smoothly. What I understand the clergy to be saying, as we organize for 2022, the more urgent concern is always about peace. How are we investing in ensuring that transition is smooth, that there will be no post-election violence? We cannot rule out the possibility of political violence before, during, or even after the election. So that reconciliation must be understood in the limited context that even if the president wants to support Raila Odinga, he must do so in a manner that does not compromise the political stability of the country. That they must do. We expect at one point the president, the deputy president, and all other political contenders will come together on a national platform, as they've done before, to commit to peace and then let everyone be released to organize the way they want.
Okay. Of course, we'll return to the topic later on when you talk about the final 10 months of the Uhuru presidency. But now I want us to take a look at what's going on today. And that is to do with the voter listing that is expected to begin across the 47 counties. And Wafula Chebukati says that they have 3 BVR kits in every ward. And they're saying they would have wanted to have a kit at every registration center. But first, let's listen to this.
We're hopeful that we have allocated 3 BVR kits per ward, which will be going around, and we are hopeful that we shall reach the target. But if we don't, then we shall be doing mass voter registration next year in January. We're hopeful that then we shall fill the remaining numbers that we may not have achieved.
Right, and you'll shortly be looking at the numbers, but let me start with the question, Honorable Mbui, because the ABC chair, when he says of the 3 BVR kits, the director in charge of voter registration, that is Masood, was on Citizen TV last night, and he said that the reason is because they didn't have sufficient resources. And they're actually saying that for now, they only have 1 voter registration drive, that is the one that begins today, because they're not assured of resources to do another one in January, and therefore they are hoping that they can achieve as much new voters this season. How does this sit with you, the political class, at a time that every other political leader would want to list as many in their region, yet the Commission appears not to have sufficient resources?
Thank you, Sam. The issue of resources is a complicated issue because many times, blame goes to Parliament, and I guess that's why you've told me the political class, and you've talked about this issue as if we are 100% in control. It's a complex process because, the country has been hit by a lot of issues, especially COVID, and so, of course, we have to balance how money is distributed out to the different, state departments. And I think the IBC hasn't got enough money, and they've always complained about that from inception, not just this year, but every year. Mm-hmm. I want to say there is enough time. In my opinion, I think there's still enough time for registration, because we have this year and we have most of next year, because the elections is in August. So I think there is enough time. There's also enough time for us to listen to IBC and see if we can also do within the mandate of the House, we can be able to probably do some amendments and increase the budget. So it's possible that they'll be able to get what they require. I think what matters most is when budget making is being done, I think everybody needs to be able to defend their cause properly. Because sometimes, there's little money, there's conflicting interest, everybody wants a piece of that money. The money is in one basket and everyone wants to pick as much as they can. So unless you're able to convince the budget committee, and of course Treasury, because Treasury is really the driver behind it, sometimes you find that some areas get little money. But let me say that the issue of 3 kits for registration is really a tragedy, because I would assume that one of the wards would have almost 30-40 polling centers, and if they have only 3 kits, that means that you're having 1 kit maybe for more than 10 polling centers, and that's really going to be very difficult to reach as many people as possible. For the elections to be free and credible, and for people to believe that the elections were fair, there needs to be enough kits to register as many people as possible. Because you see, now what they're doing is they're registering people and then moving the kits to another area for maybe for a week, and then they go to another area for another week. And you also know that Kenyans are mobile. Some people want to vote in the rural areas, they're working in the city, so they get opportunities only once in a while. So unless we are able to continuously register with kits available in every polling station, it's going to be the people who are going to feel that the elections were unfair because they were unable to register as many people as possible. But we'll want to encourage our people to note the dates when the registration is being done in their centers, so that they can go confirm that their names are still in the register, and if they are not, then they can register afresh. So it's important that Kenyans try and take advantage of the situation and register as much as possible. But going forward, IEBC will require to be given more money to be able to have at least kits in every single polling station for a period at least of 2-3 months, so that we can say the next election will be free and fair, because everyone will have had an opportunity. I will tell you that in the last elections and the one before that, those of us in the region that was not supporting Jubilee believed that Jubilee registered more in their regions because they had an advantage. And that was what we believed. And that is why even when the people voted from our region, even after the election, even when the results were announced, we always believed that they were registering more from certain areas. In fact, at one time, you remember, we were of the opinion that IEBC was registering even underage children so that they could vote. So if you open up, like now they've said they're giving three kits per ward. That means that all of us are now operating from a level playing field, which is a very positive thing.
you need an ID for you to register.
Yes,
Why
but
would you say they were registering underage children?
I'm telling you that is what, and you didn't see the photo that circulated on social media. I'm just saying we believed. I'm not saying we have evidence, because if we had evidence, but there was a photo that circulated of a very, very young fella, and there was that understanding that maybe there is an area where ID cards were being given even to people who are below age.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that currently now, if you're giving 3 kits in every ward, it means then you've already leveled the playing field. Previously, it wasn't being done that way.
Unfortunately, some wards are so extensive and they have more people, obviously. I'll get to you, Wakili, but first, Commissioner, the only voter registration you did, I believe, was for the 2013 general election. So that was about in 2012.
Yes.
You have not done a drive like the one IBC is currently doing, that is the enhanced voter registration. Yes. But when you reflect back, what worked that time that with now these challenges that IBC is facing they can use to deal with?
In 2013, remember there was a commission before that, which was interim in basis, and that commission created the first register. So when we came in as the new IBC, we enhanced that register to, for the 2013 election. And that is the register which is being built up all the time. The thing is, registration is a core business for IBC. And under our constitution, it's actually supposed to be continuous voter registration. But because of budgetary constraints, or the commission is never funded, they then have to wait until when they get funds so that they are able to do registration. But ideally, it's supposed to be a continuous process. Because as we keep on saying, elections is not a one-off process. It's supposed to be a cycle. But because this country plans for election in one last year to election, that's where we get the challenge of registration. But I allowed the IBC now, under the chairman, Chebukati, for rolling out this process now. And even with the little resources they have, limiting to 3 kits per ward, I think it's a starting point. Politicians, and I'm happy Mheshimiwa here is articulate on these issues, need to roll out their guys. They need also to mobilize. Political parties, it's not just about IBC. There are so many players and stakeholders in election. So politicians, political parties, civil society, we all need to mobilize our people to register. Because as you see, Kenyans have this tendency of last minute. Even with those 3 kits, I wouldn't be surprised to see people in the wards or those IBC officials idling, because people are not turning up. So the idea is we need to encourage our people to come out. The data out there is that there are almost 9 million youth who are eligible to vote in the 2022 election. But there are challenges also, because one, you cannot register as a voter unless you have an ID.
Right.
And therefore, the 2 institutions need to come together. The Registration Bureau for the IDs and the IBC for voter registration. Okay. Because, Sam, the thing is, the register, in any election, the key point is that the register is the election. Once we have a credible register, then we are assured of a credible election in 2022. So this register is key. So we must urge our people, our youth, to take up their IDs, to use this moment to register with the IBC. And in future, and I want to urge Parliament on this point, I took it up before, there is need to synchronize the law of registration so that we don't continue to have IBC with a separate register, the registration, civil register also for IDs separate. In other countries like the UK, what they use is the ordinary register, which is registration of citizens. We don't have to have another duplicate IBC register. Yeah. So I think if that Huduma number was supposed to create that, I don't know. In future, I think we need to synchronize so that we have one register.
And actually, Commissioner, some of the candidates for the IBC Commission jobs spoke at length during the interviews about that, on the proposals to have all these registers brought together. I don't know why it never happens. Let's take a look at some of the targets when it comes to registration of voters by region, and this is specific for this current drive that begins today. They are hoping that they will register 147,685 in the northeastern region. Beyond that, they are expecting that at the coast region, they will get 395,324 new voters. Another region, the counties that are in Nairobi, oh, well, of course, Nairobi is just one county, 517,238 is the target number. It's the highest anywhere in the country from a single county. Western region, 443,671 is the target for registration. Then when it comes to Nyanza, we're talking about the counties of Kisii, Nyamira, and Siaya, Homa Bay, Kisumu. It's about 600,000. For Eastern region, it's 648,752. This is stretching all the way from Marsabit down to the counties of Garissa and Lower Eastern. Then Mount Kenya, 670,297. The counties of Kiambu, Nyandarua, Murang'a, Kirinyaga, and Nyeri. Then for Rift Valley, the 14 counties of that region are hoping to net 1,069,000 new voters. And of course, there are some other statistics that you'll be seeing about the BVR kits that have been distributed. But like I said, it's 3 per ward. We'll also be looking at the specifics in terms of the target numbers per county. But Steve Ogolla, as this exercise begins, we're at a time that there's a lot of uncertainty in the country. There's this perceived voter apathy. It's too early to say, but people feel elections and politics haven't worked for Kenyans. So what is this incentive that you will tell Kenyans, especially the young ones, to come out and register to vote? Because in 2013, we had 14.3 million registered voters. In 2017, 19.6. And IBC is hoping to net up to 26 million for the next election.
I think the short answer is the youth should come out to register to vote because your future depends on it. Government is organized at the ballot. So if you don't register to vote, then other people will take up your space and will organize the government for you. And then you'll be left whining and complaining for another 5 years that the government is not working for you. You have to make a voice to be heard. So they let them come out, let them register, and then let them participate in the electoral process. Because if they don't, there will be a government nonetheless. Mm-hmm. There will be a government after the next election. So when we talk about voter apathy, I think it will be understood as a silent protest. But it's the kind of protest that undermines the overall objective. If you're protesting against bad decisions, bad governance, then the more reason why you need to participate robustly in the electoral process. But there's a question there that I have to respond to. Mm-hmm. The ongoing voter registration exercise, I want to tell IBC very firmly, do not be under any pressure to please any political quota. In fact, this time round, the vigilant public will be the one that will be protecting the integrity and the credibility of the commission by initiating a series of public interest litigations, because when the Constitution declares IBC as independent, mm-hmm. but in terms of functional or operational independence, it is denied the funds that it needs to perform its functions. Then you can't blame the Commission for mistakes that are not authored by it. IBC is facing challenges that are external to it. You've heard the Commissioner talk about funds. The Chairman himself talked about lack of adequate funds. Our political leaders, mm-hmm. have a residual obligation, not residual, a core obligation of oversighting Treasury and ensuring that Treasury releases enough funds to enable IBC to undertake all its electoral reform issues, including voter registration. Have the MPs demanded to know how much Treasury has released to IBC, how much did IBC request for in this financial year, how much has been released. You can't ask IBC to continue to ensure a mass voter registration drive, and then you deprive them of the funds. If you look at the post-election evaluation report, their own self-assessment, the Commission says clearly that the problem they see in terms of management of election is that funding is delayed until the last year in the election cycle. Politicians have refused to recognize that the election cycle covers 5 years. And that funding of the commission needs to run the entire cycle. But then in the first year of the election, when IEBC is supposed to be auditing the election, the last election, and preparing to ensure that where there is need for law reform, that law reform is completed in adequate time. If there is need for mass voter registration, you do this in the first 2.5 years. And then you can continue updating the voter register, doing small, continuous voter registration in the constituencies. But IEBC remains idle. Why? Because after the election, the financial taps are closed. And people remember last minute, and here's the money. And even now, you had the chairman say, what they requested is not what they received. Now politicians are now complaining that IEBC only has 3 BVR kits in a whole ward, and they have a lot of numbers to be registered. This, impunity will now begin to inconvenience those who have been benefiting from it. Our political leaders, we're now putting them to account. What have you done to ensure that Treasury has been releasing money timeously to the Commission? You've not done enough, but now there's still time. Can you then press the Treasury to release the monies that IEBC need to be able to function at its optimum? And I want to urge IEBC, maybe the Commissioner can also advise us here, based on his previous experience. Right. I think it's about time the Commission publishes its annual budget, the monies that it requests, and whether that amount is always being reduced by Treasury before it is taken to Parliament by approval. We want to know how much does Parliament usually approve for IEBC, and the budget that has been approved, how much is actually released. You understand? It's very important for the public to access this information. Right. If IEBC needs to benefit from the goodwill and public confidence and support. All right. Let us know how much they've been requesting for and how much they've been receiving, and let the Treasury explain why they've been delaying funds.
I want us to listen to the chairman himself, that is Wafula Chebukati, because he spoke about this sometime. It was Friday last week, after a meeting that he held with stakeholders on election and voter registration. Listen.
The Commission's budget is 40.9 billion Kenya shillings. The allocation we have by National Treasury is 26.5 billion. And we are saying as a commission that this budget we have is an activity-based budget. It's based on various itemized activities. And so we have a deficit of 14.5 billion, which must then be breached by the relevant authorities. So that is the position of the budget. The discussions are ongoing. There's a team from my office which went to meet the parliamentary committee. And we're also having discussion in National Treasury. As you know, we must be fully funded by the national government. And so we're looking forward to that issue being addressed.
Honorable Mboi, let me ask you this, because like Wakili here says, it's not the first time that IEBC is complaining about resources. I remember speaking to them sometime last year between October and November, and they told of how they had been requesting for resources, first to maintain the KIMS kits. You remember them, the ones that were used for identification of voters. They never got the resources. They needed to secure them, bring them to a central location for maintenance so they can be used for subsequent elections. It wasn't possible. They requested for money to clear pending bills. It wasn't possible. And now they're still complaining about such a critical exercise for the country, the general election. Where is the disconnect? Why is it always IEBC has to come out to the public and appear like they're complaining, yet these are challenges that Parliament can actually resolve?
I just said that IEBC have to defend their budget. And I've said Treasury also has to listen to them, because Treasury is really the driver. But let me say this. A lot of times people forget when we are talking about the budget of this country, there are so many conflicting and competing interests when it comes to the Kenya's budget, because we are not a country that can manage to give all the money to all the state departments for all the purposes. You go to the schools, you find the schools are complaining because there's constant delay in the delivery of money for free primary and free secondary education. And in fact, it is not enough. You go to the hospitals, you find there's also complaints. There's not enough money. You go to the counties, you find there's complaints. They're not getting money on time. Services are almost stalling. So the real issue is that as a nation, we are not generating enough to do everything. And that's really the problem. So in fact, to be honest, when you start talking about when there is real need for money for health, money for education, money for social services, and then you also come to defend a budget for money for elections, sometimes those competing interests might push one of those issues down. And clearly, obviously, you will imagine that IBC, when they're bringing let's talk about immediately after election, like 2018, if IBC is presenting a budget and the Ministry of Education is presenting a budget, we are likely to listen more to the Ministry of Education, because at that time it's really a matter of life and death and a matter of the future. So I think the real issue is that there's not enough money to go around, and that is really the elephant in the room. If there was enough money, IBC would be content, and so would all other departments. So I think the real issue is that the money isn't much. So we have to strike a balance, and that's why every department that asks for money never gets its full budget. No one gets all the money they ask for. So IBC might ask for so much, they'll get like 60, 70%, but that's because that is what is available. Now, the reason we amend the budget during the year is because we look at the interests and we look at the situations, and sometimes we find that some of these areas that we were not serious about, we may be forced to have to give more money. So that's why every year we amend the budget like 2 or 3 times. Okay. But let me say this about IBC. You know, we do an election in 2017. And every polling station, every polling center has got equipment. And then immediately after that, suddenly there is no equipment. I need to understand that, because I think maybe I'm too much of a layman, but I wonder what happens to the equipment we use in an election, because it has all the data. Why don't we use that equipment? Every so often we are looking for new equipment, and we are talking about that equipment having been obsolete. Does it become immediately obsolete immediately after an election? The minute I'm voted for, it doesn't work tomorrow? Why can't we use the same equipment maybe for the first 1 or 2 years? Because then you're not dealing with equipment, you're probably just dealing with personnel. Okay. So I think we need to look at those issues.
Commissioner Letangule, you may have a few answers to what he's raising, but first, when there are these budgetary delays or the cuts that Wafula Chebukati is talking about, a budget hole of 14.5 billion shillings that also probably it will still be made available but late, how does it affect the operations of the commission? And then secondly, there's a report saying that the BVR kits that your commission procured are now obsolete, and they were actually proposing to upgrade the current KIMS kits to have the option of being used for voter registration. What happens? Does technology move so fast in this country?
On the first one, on the budget, the truth is, of course, any budgetary constraint to the Commission will affect its operations. And as Wakili and myself said earlier, it's because we are not respecting the cycle that the IBC is supposed to operate with. So that if money for registration was availed like 2 years ago, probably we wouldn't be in a rush now to fund that operation. So because of this late delivery of funds, everything then becomes a rush. And that's why you see the commission, the chairman, they get panicky on getting the funds to enable them roll out the entire operations, which were meant to be for 5 years, in 1 year time. And I think the political class must realize that the work of the IBC is very critical for the stability of the country. For them to deliver credible election, they need funding. So much as we have constraints of funds to do other operations in the country, I think this year we should concentrate more on ensuring the IBC really gets the funding that it wants, so that they are able to roll out their programs very well. On the issue of BVR and technology, that has always been a challenge. Remember, during our time in 2013, we procured the BVR, but then we ended up with some laptop-based rather than the handheld gadgets. And that was the subject of the Supreme Court ruling. The thing is, in every election year, there are what we call tender wars, which derail the commission a lot. Because even as we see now, every time the commission advertises for kits or solutions, many tenderers come in, and these tenderers have a lot of interest, and they end up going to court, to the tribunal, this one called what, the tribunal on
Public Procurement
Public
Review
Procurement.
Board.
And then from there, it ends up again in the High Court, Court of Appeal, and all these have effect in delaying procurement of essential and critical gadgets for the elections. And again, the challenge has been is that we have people who we took over their kits in 2013, 2017, and there are strict conditions to those kits. So sometimes the Commission is unable to move away from the tender contract. For example, if it is MOFO, it is them who must bring in the solution, and it has monetary conditions. And so it's not just about the kits, it's also about the solution, the software, which is locked into the contract. So all those things are at play. I may not know now inside what's happening, but I think a lot is happening there.
That's very interesting, because the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board just a few weeks ago nullified a tender document that had been released by IEBC on the elections technology, KIMS technology, and they said that they have to retender, I believe, by 15th of this month. So you can see already the challenges that they are facing there. After the break, we will conclude on this conversation, but also understand that the enhanced continuous voter registration will be launched in Nakuru, and some of the key stakeholders to be in attendance, representation from Maendeleo Wanawake, PPLC, Political Parties Liaison Committee, Political Parties Registrar, there's High Commissioner of Canada, Deputy British High Commissioner, and so many others that will be in attendance. The event is expected to kick off at around 11 a.m. We're back with more after the break.